I've had a whole lot of you contact me lately wanting to know more about birth work and what things you need to consider before becoming a doula, midwife, or other birth worker. So today I thought I would address this to give you some time, some food for thought, to think about this, to chew on it, to marinate on it over the holidays, maybe when you got a little bit more downtime than you might usually have, if you want to do some research and that kind of thing. I wanted to give you the information you might need to consider before entering into this world. Let's go.
Are you a Christian woman yearning for a beautiful, joyful pregnancy and birth with a focus on God, not medical tests? Are you worried the birth you want isn't possible and you're tired of being treated like an accident waiting to happen? Hey mama, I'm Lori, host of Your Birth God's Way. I'm a certified nurse midwife now, but I wasn't always. After working for nearly 20 years in the broken maternity system, I too was in your shoes wondering how I could have the birth I wanted and that I felt God meant for me to have. I found a secret that has actually been known since the beginning of time. God's way is the best way. Spoiler alert, God made us and our babies, and He knows us best. He designed us perfectly for pregnancy, birth, and nourishing our babies after birth, if we work with His design and not against it. In this podcast, you'll learn how to be healthy and have joy during this time of life that will be over before you know it. So if you're ready to reclaim your birth and your babies for His glory, go turn on a few episodes of Bluey for that little one on your hip so you can put the focus back on you for a few minutes with me.
It's review time, and today's review is so on point for this episode. I usually, when I'm reading reviews, I'll just read the next one that has come up since the last one that I've read, but it's just so ironic how the timeliness of this one has worked out. So let me read it to you. It's from Enthusiastic Reader 23. It says, "Hi Lori, your podcast is such a blessing. It is wonderful to hear someone talk about this from a Christian perspective. God created birth, and there is such a huge missing piece when people try to take Him out of the equation. I'm still very young, not married, and not pregnant, but I love learning about midwifery as I hope to start a family and become a mama someday. I've recently begun to consider becoming a midwife and was wondering if you would consider doing an episode sharing your take on the best way to go about that and/or ways to know you're a good fit for the job, specifically without getting a nursing degree. From what I've seen, I would much rather do an apprenticeship to become a CPM, but I still have a lot more research to do. I would also love to hear your take on what life is like as a midwife. I haven't found a whole lot of podcasts that talk about this, so I'd love to hear about it from you. Thank you so much. You're a huge blessing, Lori, and I have several friends and family members who love your podcast as well. Thank you, Enthusiastic Reader, who I don't know your real name. You are a blessing to me. Thank you for this review. And if the rest of you who are out there have not taken the time to leave me a review, it helps so much. If you could just leave me a quick 5-star written review over on Apple Podcasts, it just helps me find other moms just like you, and it encourages me. Also, if you use YouTube for any reason, or even if you don't, if you want to just go on there, if you could subscribe to my channel, all of my podcasts post there as well. And very often I also post videos. So if you could go over there and subscribe, it will help me a lot again to reach other moms like you. And any videos that you watch, if you like them, if you could just give them a thumbs up, that helps as well. So thank you so much for helping me continue to grow the show, continue to reach more people. And with that, let's get into this topic, because today we're going to talk about what you need to consider before you enter birth work. Now, Enthusiastic Reader, she asked about the specific routes. Now, I'm not going to go into all the routes today because, y'all, there's just a lot. There's a lot of different types of schooling. There's some different types of licensure. I did cover this back in one of the first episodes that I did of this show, talking about the different kinds of midwives and kind of the sources where they come from and different things like that. So if you want to learn more about the sources, you can go back and listen to that, because it'll give you the same information, kind of how you enter in different ways. Just basic, quick 2 cents about it. CNMs, which is what I am, a certified nurse midwife, enter into midwifery as a nurse first. So you get your bachelor's degree in nursing, and then you get your master's to become a midwife. That's the route I took. Many other people enter as CPMs or CMs, which is certified professional midwives or certified midwives. There's different licensure in different states. It requires different things in different schooling. It's very, very hard to comprehensively cover this, but wherever you are, you'll need to look into your laws, look into your licensure, if that's the route you're going to take, to find those kind of things out. But what I want to talk about today is the life and the things you need to consider about what it's like to work in the birth world, okay? Because it is inevitable as women, as you have your beautiful births at home, that you're going to have a burning desire to help other women have the same thing. Or maybe by contrast, you actually end up seeing the reality of the medicalized model and you just realize, maybe too late, that we weren't lying. It really is real, the things we're telling you that happen over there. And you decide that you want to be a part of the movement to help women find a better way. Whatever the reason, whether it's one or the other, wanting to be with women during birth is something that I know many of you have considered or are considering. And I've had a lot of message lately, like this review here, and several emails that have come in wanting to know more about it. I've had a lot asking me just to address the reality of what life is like as a midwife. So as we head into some downtime over the holidays, I thought it would be a good time to help you kind of get a glimpse into it as you're reflecting on your past and you're looking at maybe where you're going to go in your future. I thought today would be a good time to try to address your questions. Now, sadly, as I've gotten these emails, I didn't make a running list of your questions. And when I went to try to search through my email, so much stuff came up that I couldn't find exactly who had asked me what. So forgive me for that. I'm going to do the best I can to address what I think that you're wanting to know so that I can help you anyway. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to look at a list of pros and then I'm going to look at a list of cons. And there is some overlap because some things for some people are going to be considered pros when they're really cons for others and vice versa. But I'm just going to kind of give you a quick glimpse into some things you need to think about. Let's start on the positive side. Let's start with the pros for why you should consider birth work, whether it be as a midwife, a doula, or some other sort of birth worker. It really has a lot of overlap when it comes to your lifestyle. So I'm not going to delineate, this is midwife, this is doula. So much of it is common when it comes to just what it's like for your life, okay? First of all, it is rewarding. You are invited into a part of a family's lives that they will never forget. Okay. And sometimes I look back through my birth logs of the births I've attended, and I don't remember exactly what happened or who they were because of just the nature of how my clinicals were. And yet I bet you they remember me. And that's sad. And if you're one of those people, forgive me because memory happens, right? But that particular moment in a family's life is pivotal. It's huge. And you are making a huge difference in the trajectory of their story. Now, by the way, these people who I'm talking about that I can't quite remember their exact story, these were not home births because these were hospital births that I was at a facility where I really acted a whole lot like an obstetrician, just walking in, attending the births, doing a few things through the day, and that was it. It's not the right way to give care. I didn't like it. That's why I don't do that now. But in the world of home birth, you are becoming a part of these people's story. You're seeing them in their homes regularly, and that's intimate. That is special. Are you looking for a last-minute gift for a special woman this year? Well, I've got the gift for you. Give the gift of confidence, knowledge, peace, and joy by giving the Your Birth God's Way online Christian childbirth education course. This is the most comprehensive course out there that is from a truly Christian, biblical perspective with none of that new agey woo-woo stuff that some programs have. This course covers everything from preconception to nutrition, to keeping yourself low risk throughout pregnancy, to birth choices, to labor and birth, on through to postpartum and breastfeeding. There is nothing that I don't cover. But if there is a special situation that comes up that the course doesn't address, also included is a monthly live question and answer session with me so that those questions can be asked and you'll get real, true answers without insurance influence or practice bias, just the information that you need to make informed decisions. Plus, now, through Christmas Day, the course is 10% off. Just use the code CHRISTMAS in the summary box at checkout and you'll get 10% off your course. Head over now to go.yourbirthgodsway.com and scroll down a little bit to the services offered section and click on the course button down there. If you're buying the course as a gift, once you've ordered, just shoot me a quick email to Lori, Lori, at yourbirthgodsway.com, and I'll make you a nice certificate that you can wrap up and give to the lucky mom who is clearly so very well loved by you. Again, go over to go.yourbirthgodsway.com and get yourself or a special mom in your life signed up today. And you can make a real difference in that setting. You get to watch a woman go from being not a mother into a mother, while God uses her body to make an actual human out of seemingly nothing right before your eyes. Each time you go see her, her belly's a little bigger and a little bigger, and you go from not being able to hear a heartbeat to not only hearing a heartbeat, but feeling body parts and getting little kicks. It's a wonderful experience. And you will never be forgotten, like I said, even if you forget, because you are, they might have 2, 3, 5 babies. I don't know. You might attend hundreds of births in your career, and yet they don't have that many births. Obviously, that's just not a thing that women do. They don't have that many. They are going to remember you. And that is so rewarding. When you see that baby come back, or when you go back to them for their postpartum visits and you're seeing how well they're doing, or maybe you're helping them through struggles, it is one of the more rewarding things in life, and you make a real difference. I mean, is there any part of life that is more pivotal than birth? You can actively change so much for these families for the better. Another pro is that you're offering a better way. Your care as a midwife or a doula is just better. You are giving more personalized care, more personalized attention in a way that pretty much no other practitioners are able to do. You teach women how to own their own health, thereby also teaching her children, these women's children, because all the people around them, whether they're actually physically they're watching you, or if they're just hearing about the experience, they're hearing and seeing that there is something better out there that isn't so systemic and isn't so cold and removed and detached. You help bring a non-medical event, because birth is not a medical event. It's a normal life event. You bring it back into the home where it can be special and personal and revered. And you remove this whole assembly line feel that it seems like hospitals are designed to have, where you just come in and you go here and then you do this and then you get this and then you have the baby and then you go here and you do this and you do this and you go home. It's an assembly line. You take away that feel and you make it personal and you make it warm in a way that they just can't do in a hospital. It is a transformational event. And there are not nearly enough midwives in this country, especially Christian midwives. I have so many of you contact me looking for a like-minded midwife, and I just can't find one. I've got a database of something like 90 midwives, but that's 90 for the whole country. There's only 50 states. If you're in a big state, and the closest Christian midwife is, 4 hours away, that's not feasible for most people during birth unless you just have the means to go move, basically, when it's time for birth to come, or in the time leading up to birth. That's not feasible for most people. And so we need more Christian midwives to fill this gap, as more and more women are starting to hear the truth and figure out that, wow, this really is a messed up system, and I really do need to seek out better care. In some areas there are plenty, but in other areas there are none. There might be no Christian doulas, no Christian midwives, no Christian birth workers. That is a sad state. And so when you decide to enter birth work, you are helping to fill that gap so that women have someone to turn to when it's their time to have their baby. And if you decide you want to pursue this work and you can't find anyone to help you can't find a preceptor, you're going to have to move to find a preceptor or someone to study under, and that seems to be a deterrent to you, it's actually a really good sign that you're in a place that needs you the most. So I would encourage you to try your best to persevere and find a way to get the training you need, because your area obviously needs it even more. Another pro, which can actually also be a con, depending on how you want to look at it, is the schedule. Because when you're specifically a home birth midwife, I'm not really talking about hospital midwives and hospital providers too much, because my guess is most of you who are contacting me to ask me about what birth work is like, you're really more concerned about home birth. You're not really probably going into a hospital setting. If I'm wrong, let me know. I can address it in a future episode, because hospital schedules and large practice schedules, especially as a midwife, are totally different. But when it comes to being a home birth midwife, you are the boss. You can schedule or arrange your schedule, I should say. Arrange your schedule however you need it to be arranged. Your prenatal visits can be scheduled in times that you have available. They don't have to be at a certain time each week or each month, depending on where you are in the whole prenatal flow of a pregnancy. Now, of course, births don't happen on a schedule. So that's the con side of it. Births are going to happen when births are going to happen, and then everything kind of gets thrown up in the air. But on most days, you're able to decide when you're working and when you're not. And you are usually autonomous. Usually, you're the one making the decisions, and you get to set the procedures and the policies for how you're going to design your practice. And that's nice, especially if you really are an entrepreneurial type of person and you want to have that kind of control. Okay. Again, it can also be a con because births happen when births happen. And that's going to flow into our first item on the cons list, which is the impact that birth has on your family. See, your husband only has one wife, if you're married, obviously. Your children only have one mom. And when you're having to run out to take care of other people's families, they're left without you. Now, that's okay some, but if you're doing a lot of births, it can be very taxing on your family. Moments are lost. You lose first for your babies, ball games. You miss ball games, you miss recitals, you miss, concerts, just basic, I need mom moments. Like, where's mom? I need my mom. So there's an opportunity cost that you really have to consider. What are you giving up to gain another thing? That's what opportunity cost is. So what are you going to give up to gain this profession of being able to help women? It is a trade-off. Now, I would argue it is a trade-off that's worth doing, but perhaps with limits so that you can honor your commitments to your family, because they can't go out and get a new mom. They can't go out and get a new wife. You're it. So you have to do both, and that's very hard. Remember that God really made us as keepers of the home. That's really what we're called to be. He also talks several times throughout Scripture about midwives. So we know that was a profession that was out there, and it's going to be women that are holding that profession. But very oftentimes, the midwives were older women whose children were already grown up. Okay, they've already had their babies and they're past that phase of life, and so they're more able and available to go out to women when they are needed. If you're younger, if you have a young family, it's going to be harder, and you just have to face that reality. If you're going to go into this world, there is a trade-off. Additionally, being on call limits your availability to do much of anything, including vacations. And if you say something like, well, I'm going to take off the month of August next year, inevitably, so if you're going to take off August, that means that starting, January, February, you're going to start getting calls for people who have due dates in August, and you're going to have to start telling them, no, I'm closed that month. But inevitably, your favorite family will end up expecting that month. And then you're going to push your boundaries, and you're going to increase your stress because you're going to really hope that you'll actually still be in town when they have their baby. And it's very hard. If you want to go on vacation for 1 week in a month, you really have to shut down the whole month, because you have to be available from the time they're 37 weeks to the time they have their baby, which might go up to as much as 42, maybe even a little bit more if you live in a state that will allow you to turn 10 births after 42 weeks. That's a long window, a month and a half or almost a month and a half window of time that you have to be available. So you got to stop your due dates much earlier in case they go after their due date, right? It's hard, and turning people away is hard, and that's your income. When you're gone, you're not making money, so this is hard. Your availability is to do life, to do the things that you want to do with your family, is very much impacted by this line of work. It also impacts your health. Your sleep is impacted, obviously, because guess what? Natural birth tends to happen at night when everything is calm and quiet and dark and the demands are gone for the day. Especially if you already have kids, you can finally turn your brain off and not have to, be making lunch and dinner and clean this and do that. When those demands finally stop and your brain can shut off, usually that's when labor comes on, right? Additionally, even if it's not the birth night, the night that the family is going to have their baby, often false alarms will impact sleep on the other nights when labor isn't happening yet. And that's your sleep. And sometimes once you're woken up and you get that adrenaline rush, it's very hard to go back to sleep. Your nutrition is impacted because you often just grab whatever you can find when you're running to appointments or to births or whatever. And if you're out and you're having to just grab whatever you can get, it's very often not a healthy option. You're also often more sedentary, which also isn't healthy, of course. And that just comes from having to drive from this house to that house and you're sitting in the car. You're sitting doing the visits. You're sitting. It's a lot of sitting, and that's not good for your health overall. Another con is the not so good stories. So, yeah, it's rewarding. You usually have great stories and you have great families that you love being a part of their story. But sometimes things don't go to plan. Sometimes transfers, they can occur, and they do occur. Sadly, deaths can occur, and they do. Feelings can get hurt, and they do. Now, do these things happen often? No. There are midwives who go through their entire career and never have a loss of a baby or a mom. But then there are others who do have that. And that is hard. It is traumatic. It is taxing in a way that you really can't understand until you go through it. Sometimes you end up just not liking a family. You've already hired them. You're already into the process, they've already hired you. You're already into the process, and it's very hard to navigate it because you just don't enjoy being around them. And that's not a bad thing. I mean, we know life happens. You don't like everybody, and that's okay. It's not that you hate them. It's not that they're bad people. Not everybody clicks. That's okay. But once you're already in this relationship, how do you break that off without bad things happening? Whether they get angry or smear you on social media, or you just go on through with it and you're just awkward and uncomfortable the whole time. It's just uncomfortable. Additionally, liability is real. Liability is what you have to deal with if a family decides that a bad outcome that they had was your fault and they decide to sue you. That's real. It happens. How are you going to deal with it? Are you going to carry liability insurance? Well, if you do, that's incredibly expensive. Are you going to not carry it and risk it? That's a choice that you can make, but it's real. And if it comes to that, it's going to be a tough thing for you and your family to go through. So that's definitely a con to think about. There's also discouragement you might deal with. You remember that verse? I'm not going to say, did you ever read it? Hopefully you have. But the verse in the Bible when Jesus talks about how a prophet is not without honor except in his hometown. And that's not a quote exact, but the idea is that the closer that you are to people, the more they tend to completely discount anything about you. And y'all, that is a real thing. You will get tired of people kind of ask your opinion and then just completely ignore it. You will get tired of hearing stories of yet another woman who has willingly marched into this system that you told them was going to do whatever to, and then it victimizes them and it does exactly what you said. You'll get tired of hearing about all the emergency C-sections, quote, emergency C-sections, that these women had to have, quote, had to have them. And you know good and well they weren't emergencies and they didn't have to have them. You'll get tired of trying to weed through the truth when a new client calls you and you know that the things that you're dealing with that are now obstacles for you being able to take care of them as a home birth client never had to happen. All the things that they're listing out to you, you know they didn't have to happen. And now you're having to try to figure out if you can even safely care for them at home. You'll get tired of family who won't consult you, even though you're the one who knows the most about this particular world. It's just taxing. It's discouraging. And I could go on and on with the list, but you get the picture. It's just hard. And that's actually one of the reasons why I started this podcast, was because I was tired of telling people who didn't care that what they were doing wasn't the best for them. People who hadn't asked. So I decided, you know what? I'm going to start a podcast and I'm going to talk to the people who do care, the people who do want to do better. And then that way, I don't feel like I'm talking to a brick wall. it's discouraging, and that is a con of this work. Additionally, in some places, there's regulations that keep you from being able to provide the type of care that you believe is best. Some places will not allow a midwife to attend breech birth, for instance, vaginal breech birth, obviously. Some places will not let a midwife attend a birth past 42 weeks. It doesn't matter whether you believe that that is wrong. Your regulations won't allow you to. So how are you going to handle that? It's discouraging. And then the last one I'll talk about on the cons list is just the pay. And that's not always a con. Again, this could be a little bit of a pro, but you give a lot as a midwife or a doula or birth worker. You give a lot, and you are almost never compensated enough for the amount of time and care that you put in, especially if you work in a place that is like a practice, like I talked about earlier, and especially when you take into account how many hours you are on call. Like I said a few minutes ago, you are on call from 37 weeks until the baby comes. So that you might be on call 5 weeks solid with no relief. 5 weeks solid. I should have done the math. I don't even know how many hours that is. If you were on call just one shift at a hospital for a practice, you usually get compensated. But you don't get compensated at all for home birth. That's a lot of hours of, it's not necessarily that you're working in all those hours, obviously, but it's hours that you aren't fully available to do other things. Nurse midwives in hospitals are paid a fraction of what their obstetrician counterparts make, even though sometimes they're covering all of the call as well. They may be the ones that are in-house while the obstetricians aren't. They may be the ones that take first call, meaning everybody that comes in, they call them first to assess, admit, write orders, do all the things, and then the OBGYNs come in if they're needed. And yet they make far less than the obstetricians do. Certified professional midwives usually have to be their own business managers, and also CNMs, certified nurse midwives who are home birth midwives, will often have to be their own business managers in their own billing departments, and that causes awkwardness because you're the one that's collecting the fees every time you go see them to make sure that you get paid. And if they don't pay, you're the one that has to remind them that they didn't pay. And then if they still don't pay, you're the one that has to decide how you're going to proceed. It's awkward and it's hard. And hospitals and big practices have a whole department to deal with this, but we don't have that. And that's something that as a home birth provider, most likely you will have to have, or you will have to deal with on your own. If you choose to be in network with insurance to try to help more women be able to afford your services, then you'll wait and you'll wait and you'll wait to finally be paid a fraction of what you billed. And you might have to argue and haggle to even get that. That's time away from your family, time away from doing other things you need to be doing. If you choose not to deal with insurance, then you're going to deal with women saying they can't afford your services, not realizing that their hospital birth could end up costing even more. And some of those same people are the ones that, obviously are prioritizing spending tons of money on other things, but don't prioritize spending a little bit of money to have the birth that they deserve. And it's very hard to, shall we say, keep your mouth shut sometimes and call them out because they're making choices that are setting them up for failure, and yet they say they can't afford it. It's a very, how can I explain this? The service that midwives and doulas provide is worth so much more than they charge. It's incredibly valuable. And this is just another aspect of it. Additionally, you take from your own profits to pay for your supplies, your assistants, your training, your insurance, everything. If you have an office, for your office fees, your facility fees, if you're renting or buying or whatever you're doing, all of that comes from your bottom line, not from a practice's bottom line or a hospital's bottom line. It's all on you. So that's going to impact your compensation overall. So it's definitely a decent living if you're attending, a couple births a month, maybe 3-4 births a month, depending on, what you're charging, where you're at, and how much you need for your family to live on. But as you multiply births, you also multiply your schedule and your commitments and the time away from your family. So again, it is a trade-off. And ultimately, in the end, almost never are you going to be paid what you're really worth. Now, Many people would do this work for free, even though they have bills to pay. If they weren't getting paid anything, they love it so much they would do it anyway. But the reality is we do have to pay bills and we have to have money to live. And so you want to be compensated in a way that is commensurate with the value you're providing. And that is hard, because if you really charged what you're really worth, no one could afford it, because you are worth so much in this world. And that's the truth. And if you're listening to this and you're not considering birth work, remember that. Your midwife, your doula, your birth workers, they are worth their weight in gold for the type of care they provide you. And so try your best not to give them a hard time for what they charge. They're just trying to give you the best service they can and to live. I know I've covered that on other podcasts. I'm not going to get on a soapbox, but just want to throw that out there. So I hope that this has helped you today to, get a better picture of some things to consider about birth work. If I did not cover what your question was, please shoot me an email, or even better, go over on YouTube, maybe comment on the episode there. It will help me, again, when that activity shows up on the podcast, it will help me to reach more people, because YouTube sees more activity. They say, hey, that's interesting. Let me show it to more people. And that helps me find more moms like you as they're searching on YouTube for information. So I hope this has helped you, and I look forward to seeing you back here next week. I hope you have a wonderful, beautiful holiday and Christmas day. I will see you next week.
Real quick, if today's episode blessed you in any way, would you head over to Apple Podcasts and leave me a quick 5-star written review? It'll take you less than a minute, but it's the best thank you can give me. And it will help my show to reach more mamas just like you, so we can all find God's best for our families. I'll see you right back here in a few days.